Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your joining us today. We'd like to welcome all of you to the Logistics Case Competition Information Session. The University of Louisville, our Logistics and Distribution Institute, and Logility are pleased to partner with the Kentucky TSA chapters for this competition. The competition offers student teams an opportunity to work together to solve a supply chain challenge to determine which suppliers are going to provide the needed safety system parts to assemble the vehicles from Ford. At this time, I'd like to introduce our presenters. We have Dr. Lihoy Bai, who is a professor in industrial engineering and the co-director for the Logistics and Distribution Institute, and Mr. Steve Johansson, who is with Logility, and he was the developer of the Starboard Navigator supply chain software that's going to be used in this project. We'd like to start out by just giving you a little bit of fundamentals in working with the supply chain. It seems that we have all heard the term supply chain during the last few years, but want to let you know that supply chain really is a collection of steps that the company takes to transform raw materials into a final product. They are, as part of the supply chain, there's going to be a flow of different types of information, material flow, information and data flow, as well as the money that goes for purchasing either the raw products, raw materials to actually assemble the products. Dr. Bai is going to share with you some of the key decisions that managers in the supply chain area need to make when working on how they're going to deliver their product to their customers.
All right. Thank you, Claire. Just want to have a very quick overview to give you guys what supply chain managers really, what kind of decisions they need to make. Claire on the first slide showed you kind of a product life cycle from the design of the product all the way until when a product is sold and could be returned, and that may actually start a second life of the product, which is a upgraded product. So this diagram I have here really kind of show you the process of a supply chain. On the left-hand side is what we call the supply side, and that's often called upstream of the supply chain. And then on the right-hand side, those are the customer end side. That's oftentimes refers to as the downstream of the supply chain. So the goods usually flows from the supply side to the customer side. But nowadays, the recycling and all of those, which we call the reverse logistics, can go actually from the downstream when the customer return a product, or a product can be for second life use, can go all the way back to the supply to repurpose and then become a new source of the supply. Also on this graph, you have suppliers that, can be intercontinental, say coming from Asia, China. We can stick with that original diagram, yes. And then coming to the port somewhere in New Orleans or in Boston, and then coming to the United States, for example. And then the second layer on the left, that will be your regional warehouse, where you have a lot of material, whether it's raw material or it's a finished goods to be stored. And then after that can be some close by warehouses. And then after the warehouse, it can go to, if it's a car, it can go to the dealership, or it's other product can directly go to your retail stores, and sometimes it can be B2B and then go to the businesses. Also, I try to integrate what are the cost factors in a supply chain. So you have production cost, purchasing costs on the left end of the supply side, and then what's in between logistics, you have an inventory cost, you have a transportation cost. Those two are the two major pillars that makes up for the 70% of the logistics cost. And then at the end, you have the cost of, basically selling to the customer and running those stores. Basically, if you're looking from the material flow side, so there are a couple of key decisions that a supply chain managers or as a team, they have to decide. What are the supplier selections? So nowadays, if you think about a car, it can be a supplier's a supplier. So many tiers of a supplier, we call it a supplier network. So how do you select a certain partner in that supply network? And often questions, which suppliers do you select for what product and then in what quantity? And kind of a similarly, you also have a choice. You also have to make a decision about where your warehouses, product, or for what product families you're going to use that particular warehouse. And a lot of times you hear people talking about a supply chain is about the science of determining in what quantity, how much do you want to deliver at the right time. So that's ultimately at the end, when we meet the customer, we want to make sure the supply chain design is responsiveness, meaning that it meets the customer demand when they need it at the right quantity. So those are the main decisions that will be reflected in this particular case study that we thought it was fun for you guys to try. Next slide, please. And this slide I particularly designed just to make sure you understand, just in our life, when you purchase something, either it's a high quality, but maybe the price is also high. The same thing that supply chain manager has to battle every day. One is the supply chain responsiveness. Again, the faster you can get to your customer, normally that's going to cost you more, right? So that's one thing. If you don't want to cost more, that's oftentimes what we call cost efficient or cost effective. So in that case, you may actually sacrifice some of your responsiveness. So that's when you tackle this particular case study, you will come to realize at some point you may draw, like, for example, this two-dimensional hyperplane, right? So on the x-axis, it's going to be responsiveness. In other words, let's say 90% of your customers can be reached or the product can be delivered in 2 days or 3 days. So you can have that on your x-axis. And then on your y-axis, it would be how much would that be the total cost. In the software that Mr. Johansson is going to introduce, that may be the total landed cost, okay? Looking at, for example, from a point A, which might be one strategy, you may say, yeah, if under this particular supply chain strategy, I am right at A, meaning that I have this many response days, and then my total cost is such, right? So if you can move back downwards toward the 45-degree, that would be the optimal direction you want to move to, because that's where you can reduce both of your response time as well as the cost. Unfortunately, life is not as easy as that. So oftentimes you have to battle the choice between A, which is the pink point, and then the green point, and then the yellow point. If you look at the green, yellow, and the pink, they all have their pros. They all have their cons, right? So the green point has the shortest response time, meaning it's the quickest. However, its cost is also the highest. So I do want to highlight here is, for this case study, there is no unique answer to the question that we're giving you. So as long as you can make a case, for example, down to those 3 pink and yellow points, those are my 3 strategies for my candidate strategies. As long as you can make an argument, say, I want to pick the yellow one, even though the response time is longer, but the cost is lower. So in that case, just make your argument. So part of the fun of doing a case study is open-ended.